If you're like me, you've heard about the new Tamron 20mm to 40mm for the Sony E-mount system, and you thought to yourself, 20 to 40, that's a kind of weird focal length. Why now? What's it good for? And should I buy it? Let's give it a try. It's fall in New York State, which is by far the most beautiful time of year, and it's a perfect time to test out the Tamron 20mm to 40mm lens. Now, first of all, check out how teeny this thing is. I really like having this on my camera. So 20 to 40mm, why do I want this? Normally at this time of year I'm shooting a 16 to 35, or maybe I'm shooting a 12 to 24. I like in fall, and I like with my landscapes to go pretty wide, although most people tend to go too wide with landscapes, and there really is a good reason to have telephoto lenses. But anyhow, the 16 to 35 is so typical for most photographers. It's part of that trinity of lenses that everybody should have in their bag. 20 to 40mm is an interesting focal length. It's not quite as wide, obviously, as a 16 to a 35, but do those couple of millimeters, the 4mm on the wide end, make a lot of difference? In practical shooting, I'm finding that they don't really, at least in the type of shooting I would normally shoot 16mm. If I have a scene that I want to shoot super wide, I'm normally going to go with a 12 to 24, kick it all the way open to 12mm or something like that. So for me, I tend to have a wider lens with me anyhow. Most photographers, though, don't have a 12 to 24mm. 16 to 35 tends to be as wide as most people get. So can the 20 to 40mm sit in for a 16 to 35? So far with this lens, I'm finding yes. If I'm shooting something like an entire river valley or something like a faraway mountain, the difference between 16 and 20mm is pretty negligible. And if I wanted something wider, I would switch over to my 12 to 24mm anyhow. One of the nice things about the focal length on this lens is that at 40mm, it gives you a little bit longer reach than a 35mm, which makes this less of a landscaper lens and more of an all-around lens to keep in your camera bag. 40mm is pretty close to what's considered a standard lens, and so what you get here is a slightly longer lens than if you had a 16 to 35. For things like the foliage in the woods, this has been a fantastic lens. Also, it's been a great lens when I took it around New York City and I did some work of architecture and I even did some portrait work. The nice thing about a 40mm over something like a 35mm is that it's a slightly more standard lens, which means it's slightly more what the human eye sees by itself, and so portraits are more flattering on a 40mm than on a 35mm, if only just slightly more flattering. Tamron's really been focused recently on making some very fascinating lenses. I've been using for a long time the 70 to 300mm for the Sony system. I just reviewed the 50mm to 400mm, which is in my channel, so you can check out that review. I found that that's such a good and versatile all-around lens that that's going in my camera bag for any travel that I do and for most of the days that I'm just walking around town. The 20 to 400mm lens enters that pantheon of interesting and very successful Tamron lenses. At f2.8, this lens has a really nice background defocus to it and is perfect for things like this fall foliage. The resolution is unbelievably sharp. I've been finding great detail in everything that I've shot so far with this lens. And, as with most Tamron lenses, the price point on this is very hard to beat. The list price on the Tamron 20 to 40mm lens is about $699, which, to put it into context, is less than half the price of the Sony GM 16 to 35 lens, and it's about $100 cheaper than Sony's 16 to 35G lens. For a $700 price point, this is a hell of a lens. Auto metering and auto exposure on the 20 to 40mm have been fantastic. I've been finding really great colors and really great saturation from this lens. That's not the case with every inexpensive lens that I put on the camera, but this Tamron lens has been doing very well. Color accuracy and rendition is really great on this lens. It's improved over the years. The 70 to 300mm Tamron, for example, had a little bit of a color cast to it. It was definitely more blue than other lenses. This lens seems to be pretty right on. When you're photographing with the leaves backlit, it's really producing a gorgeous, really warm and really saturated image. Of course, as this is a budget lens, you do lose a couple of things. There's no manual aperture ring on the dial. That's something I've been really getting used to and spoiled with Sony's newer lenses. There's no autofocus to manual focus lock switch on it. That's something that I really wish that this lens had. Switching back and forth between autofocus and manual focus is something I do all the time in landscape work. I have it set up so that I can switch the camera automatically to manual focus with a push of a button, but I'd still rather that be on the lens. There's also no focus hold button on this lens. I don't actually use those buttons usually for focus hold. I do use them for programmable features though. This is not something that's expected at a $700 price point, so I'm not missing it. It's just something that I wish was there because I work a lot with the G Master lenses. We live at a really interesting time where there's no such thing as a bad lens anymore. There's shades of good. Some lenses are gooder than others, some lenses are greater than others, but they all are good lenses. I haven't picked up a lens in probably 5 or 6 years that is a poor quality lens. Now, of course, there's some super cheap lenses that are just almost disposable glass at this point. Those don't have particularly good features, although the image quality is still pretty good on those lenses. It's just whether or not you want to sacrifice things like autofocus and build quality. So here we have Tamron making a whole series of lenses that's really unique. Now, some people would argue that the lens is going to be something like a 20-40mm because it's slightly cheaper to make than a 16-35, and that's definitely the case. But we also have really unique lenses like the 50-400, which is an affordable and great all-around lens, and it's not any cheaper to make that than any other 50-400 because there aren't any other 50-400mm lenses. Personally, I don't mind a little bit of a weird focal length. Focal lengths are kind of arbitrary anyhow. I mean, what is the difference between shooting a 24-70 and shooting a 28-75? It's really almost indistinguishable, and if it can save some money on the purchase cost, great. There's another thing I've been doing with this lens, and I've been using this to shoot video in the studio. It's a really nice lens because at 40mm you can get a really nice look on the person's face while you're shooting video. At the 20mm you can crop in, you can shoot super 35 and still get a really nice studio focal length. So this is a lens that I'm not just using outside here in the woods, I'm actually using in the studio as well. When I'm traveling with my family, I also don't usually like to take around something like a 24-70. No matter how small they are, they're still kind of big and they still are pretty obvious to people taking a look at you. The lenses like this 20-40mm though are a lot more compact, which means that they really draw a lot less attention, and they're still incredibly versatile lenses, especially on something like a Sony A1, where I can crop into this lens and get a really great image anyhow. It means my 40mm lens gives me a lot more reach if I need it. I've actually shot birds flying by at not too far of a distance with lenses like this and cropped in, and have gotten really fantastic images. Should you buy this lens? Well, if you're watching this video and you don't already have a 16-35mm, that means that you're probably in the market for this lens, and this is a fantastic lens to get. Will you notice that 4mm extra width? I don't know, it's hard to say. If you're going to shoot something like really wide landscape, something like mountains or river vistas or something like that, also pick up a 12-24. You can get a 12-24 in this 20-40mm lens for less than the 16-35 G Master. That's a good combination. So this is another Tamron lens that I'm going to personally purchase and stick in my camera bag. It doesn't do everything that I want to do at a wide angle, but it does everything that I want this lens to do, and that's more important to me. Let me know in the comments below if you're thinking about buying this lens or planning to buy this lens. Is the 20-40 right for you? Is there something you wish was missing? Is it too expensive? Is it too inexpensive? Let me know your thoughts below. I'm also going to link here at the end to the Tamron 50-400mm review. It's a fantastic lens also, and it shows all the interesting things Tamron is doing with glass these days. For Dave Tries This, I'm David Schloss. Thanks so much for giving this a try.